So what if I told you that the language you speak literally dictates how fast your eyes can process the color blue?
I mean, it sounds like science fiction.
Right. Or, like, what if I said that simply learning a new vocabulary word actually physically rewires your brain's executive control system?
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. I want you to hold on to those ideas
Mm.
because before we really get into the neuroscience of language for our deep dive today, I want to ground this in something incredibly personal.
Oh, definitely.
I want you to picture something. And I am almost certain you know the exact sensation I'm talking about here.
I think we've all been there.
Exactly. So think about a physical place you loved as a child. Maybe it is your old elementary school or that playground at the end of your street, or even just a house you grew up in.
Yeah, right.
Picture the sheer scale of it. In your memory, that park is this, like, endless, infinite expanse of wilderness.
Just massive.
Yeah. And the walk from your front door to the schoolyard, it felt like this epic journey, right? Like it involved crossing vast, uncharted territories.
You're practically an explorer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, picture going back to that exact same place today as an adult.
It is entirely disorienting.
Completely.
Because your physical geography, it just completely contradicts your internal geography.
It is genuinely jarring. You walk up to that building and suddenly it's just a building. It's
Yeah.
bafflingly small.
Right.
The park that was, an entire universe when you were 7 years old is actually just a meager 3 acres of patchy grass next to a strip mall.
And that epic, perilous walk to school.
It takes 4 minutes.
Yeah. And you are left standing there with a very specific, undeniable weight in your chest.
Yes. And that weight, that sensation, is the starting line for our conversation today.
It's a great place to start.
Because what is that feeling? It isn't sadness, really. You aren't mourning the park.
No, not at all.
And it isn't quite nostalgia either. Nostalgia is, it's a warm, somewhat comforting longing for the past.
Right, nostalgia feels good.
Yeah, this feeling is sharply different. It's this vertiginous, almost dizzying realization that your memory of the place, a memory that is completely colored by the magic and the literal physical reality of being 3 feet tall, is fundamentally incompatible with the actual objective reality standing right in front of you.
It's like you're grieving a scale that was entirely produced by your own youth.
Oh, that's perfectly put, yes. So here is the central mystery for you, the listener.
Yeah.
Does the English language have a word for this specific feeling?
It does not.
Not a single word.
No.
If you want to convey that feeling to a friend, you have to use a rambling paragraph, just like I did. You are literally left speechless by your own language.
You really are.
And yet, if we look around the globe, other languages have managed to capture these incredibly complex, highly specific human experiences in just a few syllables.
They absolutely have.
Like Romanian has the word door, encapsulating this complex, aching longing for something beloved that is absent.
Beautiful word.
It really is. And Portuguese has saudade, which is a melancholic yearning for a loved one, a place, a time, or even a future that never quite materialized.
Right.
Or Japanese has no aware, capturing the bittersweet awareness of the transience of things, that gentle aesthetic melancholy of impermanence.
And I think the crucial observation here isn't just, a list of neat foreign vocabulary.
Right, it's more than that.
It is the realization that these words are not naming alien feelings.
Exactly. English speakers experience the gentle melancholy of impermanence. You felt it, I felt it.
Of course. But because the English language lacks a specific dedicated container for that feeling, it remains culturally diffused.
Diffused, right.
Yeah, it's less noticed, less discussed, and less socially shared, entirely because there is no single linguistic focal point to gather the experience around.
Which brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We're going to explore one of the most massive, mind-bending questions in human cognition.
And that is, do words shape thought?
Exactly. We're going to examine what the English language says about its speakers by looking at what we've chosen to name and what we've completely ignored.
Which is very revealing.
Super revealing.
Okay.
And we will explore how learning the so-called untranslatable words of the world doesn't just improve your vocabulary. It fundamentally alters the biological hardware of your brain and changes the resolution at which you perceive reality.
We're essentially stepping into one of the oldest and most fiercely contested battlegrounds in linguistics and philosophy.
Get ready.
Yeah, we'll be looking at the architecture of human cognition, the mechanics of cross-cultural psychology, and the absolute limits of translation.
So for anyone listening who is learning English or learning any other language, we are going to demonstrate that the words that refuse to translate seamlessly, they are not frustrating roadblocks.
No, they are the most valuable windows we have.
Yes, they show us the precise mechanics of how different cultures have chosen to carve up the human experience. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the hard science. How does language actually wire the brain?
It's a fascinating area.
Because I know there is a famous theory about this,
Right.
but I really want to understand the actual architecture of the mind here.
Sure. So, to understand the modern consensus, we have to go back to the early 20th century.
Okay.
There was a chemical engineer turned linguist named Benjamin Lee Whorf and his mentor, the anthropologist Edward Sapir.
Right, the Sapir-Whorf guys.
That's them. They proposed an idea that has completely captivated and frankly defeated the field of cognitive science ever since.
It's a huge debate.
It really is. It's known today as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or linguistic relativity. And to really grasp it, we have to split it into two distinct versions.
Because one version is essentially a cognitive prison and the other is a bit more flexible, right?
It is a very fair way to summarize it. Let's look at the absolute version first.
Okay.
Linguists call it the strong version, or linguistic determinism.
Determinism. Got it.
This is the radical, almost dystopian claim that language strictly and rigidly determines thought.
It forces it.
Yeah, it argues that the structure of your language is the absolute limit of your cognition. If you do not have a word for a concept, you literally, biologically, cannot formulate a thought about that concept.
I have a massive problem with that premise.
Most people do.
I mean, if linguistic determinism were true, how would anyone ever invent a new word?
Exactly.
The very act of inventing a word implies that the thought, the concept, it had to exist in the person's mind before the language did.
Right.
Furthermore, how do babies learn language if they can't think before they have vocabulary? It just doesn't make sense.
That is precisely the critique that dismantled the strong version.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you're hitting on the exact logical flaw that cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker and others pointed out. The strong version is almost universally rejected by modern linguists.
Says relief.
Right. Extensive research over decades has proven that human beings are perfectly capable of non-linguistic thought. We can perceive color distinctions our language ignores. We can understand complex emotional concepts our culture hasn't labeled.
Like the park shrinking feeling.
Exactly. And we can form spatial ideas that our language doesn't have a specific grammatical category for. Language is not a straitjacket.
Okay, so if we throw out the strong version, the idea that language acts as a literal brick wall, stopping you from entering certain areas of thought, what is the alternative? What is the weak version?
So the weak version, known as linguistic relativity, dials back the absolutism.
It softens it.
Yes. It proposes that language influences thought.
Influences.
Right. It doesn't restrict your cognitive abilities, but it routinely shapes your cognitive habits.
Okay, I think I see where you're going.
It makes certain concepts more salient, more easily processed, and more natural to think about simply because your language requires you to constantly pay attention to them.
Okay, so to use an analogy, if the strong version is a brick wall, the weak version is more like a paved path through a dense forest.
I like that.
You can absolutely decide to walk off the trail, hack through the thick brush, get scratched up by thorns, and forge your own way to reach a new destination or a new concept.
You can do the work.
Right. But naturally, instinctively, and routinely, you are going to take the paved path because it requires significantly less cognitive load.
It's just easier.
The language paves the path for certain specific ways of thinking.
That is an incredibly elegant way to conceptualize it, yes. The language reduces the friction for certain thoughts.
Less friction.
And unlike the strong version, the weak version is supported by a mountain of fascinating empirical data.
Which I love.
Let's return to the claim you made in the introduction about processing the color blue.
Right, because color perception feels like it should be totally immune to language.
You'd think so.
Color is just objective physics. It's a specific wavelength of light hitting the photoreceptor cells in the retina. How on earth can a vocabulary word change physics?
Well, it doesn't change the physics of light. It changes the processing speed of the visual cortex.
The processing speed.
Yeah. Different languages divide the visible color spectrum at different points.
Okay.
Let's take Russian. In English, we have the broad basic term blue.
Yeah.
We can modify it by saying light blue or dark blue, but they are fundamentally variations of the exact same category.
Right. They are both just flavors of blue.
Russian does not do this.
Oh.
Russian has two entirely separate, basic, unmodifiable terms. They have sininy for dark blue and goluboy for light blue.
Okay, wait. So to a Russian speaker's brain, Sini and Goluboy are as categorically different as, like, red and pink are to an English speaker.
Precisely.
Right.
And this is where researchers like Jonathan Winoware at MIT decided to test the paved path theory.
What did they do?
They set up an experiment where they showed English speakers and Russian speakers 3 squares of color.
Okay.
A single square on top and 2 squares below it. The participants simply had to press a button indicating which of the bottom squares matched the top square.
Just a basic matching game.
A completely basic matching game, but timed to the millisecond.
Yep.
And here's the critical finding. When the 2 bottom squares were both shades of cine, so dark blue Russian speakers and English speakers took roughly the same amount of time to find the match.
Makes sense.
But when the 2 bottom squares straddled the linguistic boundary, meaning when one was cine and the other was goluboy, the Russian speakers were measurably, significantly faster at identifying the match than the English speakers.
That is staggering.
It's amazing.
The linguistic boundary creates a perceptual acceleration
Yes.
because their language constantly forces them to categorize dark blue and light blue as fundamentally different things. Their visual cortex has literally optimized the neural pathways to detect that specific boundary.
Exactly. The brain essentially preloads the distinction.
Wow.
And researchers confirmed this was a linguistic effect by introducing spatial interference.
What does that mean?
When they made the Russian speakers simultaneously perform a verbal task, like, say, reciting a string of numbers while doing the color test, the speed advantage completely disappeared.
Because their language center was distracted.
Exactly. When you tie up the language center of the brain, the visual advantage vanishes. The word literally speeds up the eye.
Okay, color is incredible. But what about something more foundational, like our sense of physical space? Show me how language alters how we exist in the physical world.
For that, we have to look at spatial reasoning. And the work of cognitive scientist Lera Boroditsky is essential here.
Oh, I've heard of her work.
It's fantastic. In English, we describe spatial relationships using what is called an egocentric or relative frame of reference.
Okay.
We say things like, the cup is to my left, or the door is behind you.
Right. Everything is mapped relative to the human body. Left changes depending on which way I am facing at any given moment.
Exactly. But not all languages do this.
Really?
The Kuuk-Thaayorre people, which is an Aboriginal community in Pormpuraaw, Australia, they do not use relative terms.
At all?
At all. They do not have words for left, right, front, or back.
What do they use?
They use an absolute frame of reference. They exclusively use cardinal directions. North, south, east, west.
Wait. So, in everyday conversation, instead of saying, can you pass the salt to your right, they would say, can you pass the salt to the southeast?
Exactly. Or, there's a fly on your southwest shoulder.
That's intense.
To even speak a basic, grammatically correct sentence in Kuuk-Thaayorre, you have to know your exact absolute orientation at all times.
Because otherwise the sentence doesn't work.
Right. And because their language demands this constantly, from the time they are literally infants, speakers of this language develop an extraordinary, unwavering sense of cardinal direction.
Wait, I have to ask about the actual mechanics of this. How do they actually do it?
That's a fair question.
If you put a Kuuk-Thaayorre speaker in a windowless room, do they just magically know where north is? Do they have, like, magnetite in their brains, like migrating birds?
No, they don't have magical compasses in their brains. But they have something equally impressive. They have highly optimized environmental integration.
What does that mean?
Because they are constantly tracking their orientation, they subconsciously monitor the movement of the sun, the prevailing winds, the shadow angles, and the microtopography of the land.
Oh, wow.
It is a process called dead reckoning. Now, if you blindfolded a Kuuk-Thaayorre speaker, spun them around, and dropped them in a completely windowless room, they might temporarily lose their bearing.
Right.
But the moment they have even a sliver of environmental data, they recalibrate instantly.
Because their language requires it.
Exactly.
An English speaker's brain considers absolute direction completely irrelevant to everyday conversation, so we just discard that environmental data. We don't notice the shadows.
We don't need to.
But a Kuuk-Thaayorre speaker's brain considers it critical for survival and social interaction, so it runs a background process 24/7
Constantly.
that completely validates the weak Sapir-Whorf theory. the paved path.
And we see the exact same architectural shift with time perception.
How so?
Well, English largely encodes time spatially as a horizontal dimension. We put the past behind us and we march forward into the future.
We visualize a literal horizontal timeline, like reading left to right.
Exactly. But Mandarin often encodes time vertically.
Vertically?
Yes. They use the words shang, which means up, and xia, which means down, to talk about time.
Oh, that's right.
Last month is the up month, next month is the down month.
Wow.
And when psychologists ask Mandarin speakers to physically arrange objects representing temporal sequences, they are much more likely to arrange them vertically on a table than English speakers are.
So the spatial metaphor that's embedded in the language physically alters how the brain organizes abstract concepts like time.
Yes, exactly.
So to synthesize this for the listener, language does not trap you. You can learn to track north, or you can train your eye to see different shades of blue.
Absolutely.
But language deeply carves the grooves along which your default thoughts flow.
That's it.
The concepts your native language names frequently become the concepts that you and your entire culture prioritize and process most efficiently. And the concepts your language leaves unnamed. They aren't invisible, but they require a heavy cognitive load to discuss. They are less noticed, and crucially, they are less culturally elaborated upon.
And that insight right there, that acts as a bridge.
How so?
Because if we accept that the vocabulary of a language is essentially a topographical map of a culture's consciousness, well, we can turn that lens on ourselves.
Which is exactly what I want to do next. If the words a language does have reveal its historical and cultural preoccupations, then what does the English language say about us?
That's a great question.
Let's step through the Anglo-American looking glass. I want to unpack the sociological origins of what English uniquely names.
It is a highly revealing exercise. English has developed an incredibly specific vocabulary for concepts that genuinely lack direct, single-word equivalents in many other languages.
Okay, let's hear one.
Let's start with a beautiful, optimistic example.
Serendipity.
Serendipity is one of my favorite words.
It's a good one. Making a brilliant, fortunate discovery while you were actually searching for something entirely different.
The history of this word is fascinating. It was explicitly coined by the English writer Horace Walpole in 1754.
Okay.
He was writing a letter to a friend, and he based the word on a Persian fairy tale he had read called The Three Princes of Serendip, whose heroes were always making discoveries by accidents and sagacity.
That's a great origin story. But why did English adopt it so enthusiastically?
What do you mean?
Well, the experience of a happy accident is universal, right?
Yeah.
An ancient Roman farmer could have stumbled upon a gold coin while plowing his field. Why didn't Latin have a specific word for it?
It's because of the cultural moment English was experiencing in the mid-18th century.
The Enlightenment.
Exactly. This was the heart of the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution. Anglo-American culture was deeply preoccupied with discovery, invention, and intellectual exploration.
Okay, I see.
To have a specific word for the phenomenon of accidental brilliance, it suggests a culture that highly values open-ended inquiry. It implies a society that believes we should cultivate a specific, observant openness to the unexpected. We needed a word to describe the mechanism of scientific and creative breakthroughs.
We named it because we prized the methodology. We built a paved path for the happy accident.
Perfectly said.
Let's shift from optimism to social friction. Let's talk about the word awkward.
Awkward is a brilliant psychological profile of the English speaker.
Oh, this ought to be good.
It describes a very specific, low-level, highly uncomfortable social feeling. It is a situation that is not exactly embarrassing, because embarrassment implies a failure on your part, and it is not shameful.
No, it's just weird.
Right. It is simply a moment where the social gears grind together.
It is the feeling when you say a warm goodbye to a colleague, you turn to leave, and then you realize you were both walking into the exact same elevator bank.
The worst.
It isn't a moral failing, it's just awkward.
Yeah.
But surely other cultures feel this.
The physiological feeling of social unease exists everywhere. But the sociological decision to name it, isolate it, and obsess over it as a distinct category, that is a profound English specialty.
Why are we so obsessed with it?
Sociologists like Harold Garfinkel studied this through what he called breaching experiments, where people would intentionally break minor social rules just to observe the reaction.
Like standing facing the back of an elevator.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
Anglo-American culture relies heavily on implicit social contracts, unspoken rules of politeness, distance, and conversational turn-taking.
Because we don't have the explicit, rigid, hierarchical formalities of, say, traditional Japanese or Korean social structures.
Right.
So our social interactions are constantly being negotiated on the fly.
Precisely. And because it is all negotiated dynamically, there is a constant ambient risk of the negotiation failing slightly.
And there it is.
Awkward is the word English speakers invented to label the precise moment when the implicit social contract glitches, but nobody is directly at fault. It highlights a culture highly preoccupied with social friction and maintaining a smooth, if superficial, individualistic harmony.
We needed a diagnostic tool for our specific brand of social anxiety.
We really did.
Okay, here is one that reveals a lot about our economic anxieties. Procrastination.
Oh, procrastination. The word has Latin roots, procrastinare, meaning to put off until tomorrow.
Sure.
But the sheer cultural weight, the absolute moral elaboration of this concept is deeply Anglo-American.
Right, because procrastination isn't just delaying. If a lion sleeps for 20 hours instead of hunting, we don't call the lion a procrastinator.
We just call it a lion.
Exactly. Procrastination requires an intention to do a task, a failure to execute the task, and a heavy dose of subsequent guilt.
And why the guilt?
Yeah, why?
This points directly to the Protestant work ethic and the Industrial Revolution. In English-speaking cultures, particularly during industrialization, time became explicitly commodified.
Time is money.
Time is money. Therefore, your time belongs to your productivity. Procrastination isn't just a failure of scheduling. In the Anglo-American mindset, it is a moral failure. It is the theft of productive time.
Which perfectly explains why we have built an entire economic sector around curing the thing we named.
Right.
The productivity advice, the Pomodoro timers, the self-help industry, it all revolves around this single cultural obsession with deferred labor.
We pathologized delay.
We really did.
And that industrial mindset ties perfectly into another highly specific English word, feedback.
Feedback, which sounds so natural to us today. I'd love to get your feedback on this report.
But look at the history of the word. Feedback is a mechanical concept.
Mechanical.
In the 1940s, during the development of cybernetics by Norbert Wiener, feedback referred strictly to the return of a fraction of the output signal from an electronic circuit.
Oh, like the squeal of a microphone too close to a speaker.
Exactly. It was about self-correcting machines, like guided missiles adjusting their trajectory.
Wait. And we took a term for guided missiles and applied it to human beings in an office.
We did, starting heavily in the 1970s corporate culture. We imported this mechanical engineering concept into professional and interpersonal language to mean a structured, evaluative response to human performance.
That is slightly dystopian.
It reveals a distinctly Anglo-American approach to work. We view human organizations as complex machines that can be optimized, calibrated, and debugged through continuous data loops.
And other languages don't have this.
Many other languages have simply borrowed the English word feedback entirely.
Really?
Yeah, they don't translate it because the underlying concept, this highly structured, depersonalized, systematic evaluation, is a cultural export. When other cultures adopt Western corporate practices, they have to adopt the vocabulary that makes those practices possible.
That is fascinating. Let's talk about two more concepts that seem deeply rooted in British history specifically: privacy and fair play.
These are profoundly revealing. Take privacy. It is the concept of a personal sphere, both physical and informational, into which others should not intrude without an explicit invitation.
The right to be let alone.
Right. Now, it might shock an English speaker to learn that a direct, single-word equivalent is surprisingly rare globally.
I genuinely struggle to understand how a society functions without a word for privacy.
That struggle is your English linguistic programming at work.
Fair enough.
The absence of the word in other languages reflects a completely different historical organization of public and private life.
How so?
Think about the physical history of England. The Enclosure Acts, the literal building of fences around private property, the rise of the nuclear family over the extended multi-generational household.
Oh, I see.
German comes close with private sphere, but in many cultures, the idea of an isolated individual bubble that must be fiercely protected from the community is viewed with suspicion, not reverence.
So our vocabulary reflects our deep-seated individualism.
Exactly.
What about fair play?
Fair play is the specifically British concept of behaving according to the rules of a game, even when those rules disadvantage you. And, crucially, even when the referee isn't looking.
It is the internalizing of the rules. The idea that winning illegitimately is worse than losing fairly.
Exactly. And the history here is tied directly to the Victorian public boarding school system.
Like Eton and Rugby.
Right. These schools were designed to train the administrators of the British Empire. They used sports not just for physical fitness, but as a moral training ground.
Huh.
Fair play was a moral geometry disguised as sportsmanship. It was the idea that there is an objective standard of right and wrong that supersedes personal gain or tribal loyalty.
And like feedback, it was an export.
Yes. Through colonial institutions, the British exported the concept of fair play globally. But because the specific moral architecture of the idea was so historically contingent, many languages lack a direct, native, single-word equivalent.
Okay, we have painted a picture of the English speaker.
A very specific picture.
We are a people who value scientific serendipity. We suffer from constant minor social awkwardness. We feel immense guilt over industrial procrastination.
We treat our colleagues like cybernetic systems requiring feedback.
Right. We guard our individual privacy behind high fences, and we demand fair play.
It is a rather coherent, if slightly stressed, cultural profile.
But every map has blank spaces.
Definitely.
If English focuses so heavily on productivity, social friction, and individual boundaries, what profound, beautiful human experiences have we entirely failed to map?
Let's look at the gaps.
Yes, I want to take the listener on a tour of the linguistic gaps. I want to look at the words that English forces us to describe in clumsy, inadequate sentences.
This is where we step into the masterclass of so-called untranslatable words.
I love these.
These words are the artifacts of other cultures prioritizing entirely different spheres of human experience.
Where do we start?
Let's begin with German. The German language is legendary for its precision in naming highly specific, complex, emotional, and psychological states.
The ultimate champions of the compound word.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the most famous one, because it reveals something slightly dark about human nature.
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude.
It literally translates to damage joy. It means experiencing pleasure, joy, or self-satisfaction that comes from learning of or witnessing the troubles, failures, or humiliation of another person.
It is the secret, slightly shameful thrill you get when the arrogant coworker gets a dressing down from the boss.
Or when someone who cuts you off aggressively in traffic immediately gets pulled over.
Yes. But why does German have this word and English doesn't? Or didn't originally?
Well, English eventually borrowed the word because the concept is too universally human to ignore.
We couldn't pretend we didn't feel it.
Right. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, Schadenfreude is tied to in-group cohesion and social justice.
Okay.
When someone violates the social order, like cutting you off in traffic and they are punished for it, the brain rewards you with a hit of dopamine because fairness has been restored.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The Germans simply had the linguistic mechanics, the ability to seamlessly compound nouns, to accurately label this precise psychological mechanism long before English speakers admitted to feeling it.
What else do the Germans have? Something more philosophical, maybe.
They have Weltschmerz,
Weltschmerz.
literally world pain. It denotes a deep sadness or profound melancholy felt when you compare the actual state of the world to an idealized perfect state.
Wow.
It is the specific, crushing grief of the idealist confronting the brutal reality of human nature and society.
That is incredibly heavy. That is the word for the political activists, the humanitarians, the dreamers who watch the evening news and just feel an existential heartbreak.
That's exactly it.
In English, we would clumsily call that being depressed about the news, but that completely misses the nuance.
It misses the philosophy. Depression is a clinical state. Weltschmerz is a philosophical stance.
I see.
It grew out of the German Romantic movement of the 19th century. Writers like Goethe, who were reacting against the cold rationalism of the Enlightenment and the brutalism of early industrialization. It is a culturally specific naming of a philosophical sorrow.
Here is a German word that feels incredibly relevant to the modern age. Torschlusspanik.
Yes. Literally gate-closing panic.
I feel this one deeply.
It describes the sudden acute anxiety that time is running out to achieve your life goals or make crucial decisions.
Where does it come from?
It originally referred to the panic of medieval citizens rushing to get inside the city walls before the gates were locked for the night.
And today, it perfectly describes the feeling of being 29 years old, endlessly scrolling through social media, seeing everyone you know, buying houses, getting promotions, getting married.
Yep.
You feel this frantic, suffocating, ticking clock in your chest. The gates of youth and opportunity are swinging shut.
That's Torschlusspanik.
In English, we say midlife crisis, but a crisis is an event. Torsional Hispanic captures the underlying ambient anxiety.
It's the diagnosis of the fear itself.
Do they have any happy words?
Another beautiful German concept is Fernweh.
Fernweh.
It is the ache for distant, unknown places. It is the exact mirrored opposite of homesickness.
The opposite.
Yes, it is a specific, painful longing to leave your familiar surroundings and travel to the faraway, even if you have never been there before.
Homesickness is looking backward to safety. Fernweh is looking outward to the unknown. That is a vital distinction.
It really is.
Now, I want to move away from German angst and travel to a language renowned for its aesthetics and its deep integration of philosophy into daily life. Let's look at Japanese.
Oh, Japanese is incredible for this.
What gaps in the human experience does Japanese fill for us?
Japanese vocabulary offers profound insights into finding harmony and accepting impermanence. Let's start with a word that has gained a lot of traction recently. Ikigai.
I've seen this in pop psychology books.
A lot of people have.
It's usually presented as a Venn diagram. What you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. The center is your ikigai.
Right. But that is the highly westernized corporate interpretation of the word.
Really?
Yeah. The actual Japanese concept is much older and more nuanced, dating back to the Heian period. It roughly translates to a reason for being or the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning.
Okay.
But historically, it was not about achieving massive career success or finding your passion. It was about the daily micro-contributions you make to your community.
So if I am a Westerner, my goal is to find a high-paying job I am passionate about.
Right.
If I am operating under traditional ikigai, my reason for being might simply be the care I take in making breakfast for my family, or the precise way I sweep the storefront.
Exactly. In English-speaking cultures, we often violently separate our true passion from our day job, leading to immense dissatisfaction.
We really do.
Ikigai suggests a cultural framework where duty, daily labor, and personal identity are meant to harmonize. It isn't a destination you arrive at. It is a practice of finding value in your current obligations.
That reframes the entire concept of work.
It does.
What about their aesthetic vocabulary?
The quintessential concept is wabi-sabi.
Wabi-sabi.
This is a worldview centered on the acceptance of transience and imperfection. It is the aesthetic appreciation of beauty that is imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete.
I immediately think of kintsugi.
Yes.
The art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer. You don't try to hide the crack.
Yeah.
You illuminate it because the breakage and the repair are part of the object's history.
Yes. Wabi-sabi has roots in Zen Buddhism and the Japanese tea ceremony. It completely rejects the Western classical Greek ideal of perfect symmetry and eternal, unchanging beauty.
It's the opposite of marble statues.
Exactly. Under wabi-sabi, the asymmetrical, moss-covered stone is more beautiful than the polished marble statue because the stone reflects the reality of nature and time.
The English language strives for words like flawless and pristine. Japanese creates a space to revere the flawed and the fading.
And we see that acute sensitivity to the physical world in a word like komorebi.
What is that?
This refers specifically to the dappled sunlight that filters through the leaves of trees.
We have all seen that exact, beautiful pattern of light on a forest floor, but English has never bothered to give it a noun.
Because English aesthetics are often focused on the grand and the sublime. Mountains, oceans, storms.
The big stuff.
Right. Japanese aesthetics frequently zoom in on the microphenomena of nature. They also have natsukashi.
Is that like nostalgia?
It is often translated as nostalgia, but that is imprecise. Nostalgia in English is broad.
Right.
Natsukashi is a warm, sudden yearning for the past that is specifically triggered by a sensory detail.
Oh, like a smell.
A sudden smell, a specific sound, a glimpse of an old toy. It is the sensory trigger of memory.
Let's shift our geography again. I want to look at Northern Europe and the Iberian Peninsula, specifically the Nordics and the Portuguese.
Two very different places.
They seem to have linguistically mastered two very different extremes. Extreme comfort and profound sorrow.
They absolutely have, and both are deeply tied to their geography and history. Let's look at Denmark and the concept of hygge. You have likely heard this term. It became a global lifestyle trend a few years ago.
Right. It usually involves chunky knit blankets, lit candles, and hot cocoa. But what does it actually mean?
Hygge is the concept of comfortable, cozy conviviality. It is the intentional creation of a warm atmosphere and the enjoyment of the good things in life with good people.
Okay.
But to understand why the Danes needed this word, you have to look at their environment and society. Denmark has long, dark, brutal winters. Historically, surviving those winters required intense communal cooperation.
So it isn't just about aesthetic coziness. It was originally a survival mechanism that evolved into a cultural cornerstone.
Furthermore, modern Denmark has a highly developed social welfare state. Their basic needs, healthcare, education, extreme poverty prevention are largely taken care of.
They don't have to worry about the basics.
Right. Because they are not trapped in a relentless individualistic struggle for basic survival, their cultural energy can be directed inward, toward optimizing the psychological comfort of their immediate domestic sphere.
Wow.
Hig is the linguistic manifestation of a society that has the luxury to prioritize psychological safety.
Compare that to the United States, where our vocabulary is dominated by hustle, grind, and optimization. Our language reflects our lack of a safety net.
It's a stark contrast.
What about Norway?
Norway gives us friluftsliv.
Friluftsliv.
It translates to free air life. It was coined by the playwright Henrik Ibsen in 1859.
Okay.
It is the deep, spiritual, and philosophical connection to nature achieved through outdoor life and physical activity.
I find this fascinating because in English, going outside is usually framed around health or conquest.
Right.
We go jogging to burn calories, or we climb a mountain to conquer the summit. It's a workout.
Friluftsliv completely rejects the idea of conquering nature. It is not about reaching the peak. It is about communing with the forest through the act of being within it.
Just existing out there.
Right. It is a recognized cultural philosophy that moving through the natural world is essential to human well-being.
Okay, let's contrast that Nordic comfort with Portuguese sorrow. Let's talk about saudade.
Saudade is arguably the most famous, most deeply analyzed, untranslatable word in the world.
It's a heavy one.
As we mentioned at the start, it is a profound, melancholic longing for something beloved that is absent. But to understand it, you must understand Portuguese history.
The age of discovery.
Exactly. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Portugal was a massive maritime empire. A huge portion of their population, sailors, explorers, merchants, left the shores of Portugal, and countless numbers of them never returned, lost to the sea or to the colonies.
So the entire nation the families left behind were plunged into a state of permanent, unresolved grief. They were waiting for ships that would never arrive.
Saudade was born from that national trauma. It is intrinsically tied to the sea, to distance, and to fatalism.
It's so poetic.
It even ties into the myth of Sebastianism, the belief that the lost King Sebastian would return from the mist to save Portugal. Saudade is not a passing feeling of missing someone. It is the defining pillar of the Portuguese soul. It is a beautiful, devastating cultural identity marker.
Which makes the Brazilian-Portuguese word desenrascanço such a fascinating counterbalance.
Yes. Desenrascanço is the ability to improvise a brilliant solution to a sudden problem with whatever meager tools happen to be at hand.
That's amazing.
It is the creative art of muddling through a crisis with sheer ingenuity.
It is the MacGyver word. It is fixing a broken car engine with a paperclip, a piece of chewing gum, and unearned confidence, and actually making it work.
Exactly.
I love that there is a revered cultural noun for just brilliantly hacking your way out of a disaster.
I want to highlight just a few more words from around the world to show the incredible breadth of human experience that English misses.
Please.
From Finnish, we have sisu.
I know this one. It is a specific quality of Finnish character. Stoic determination, the grit to continue despite overwhelming adversity, the mental strength to endure the unendurable.
Yes. And it is specifically tied to the brutal Finnish climate and their historical resistance against larger invading forces like the Soviet Union during the Winter War.
That icy resilience.
It is an icy, unbreakable resilience. Now, from Arabic, we have a devastatingly poetic phrase, ya bernay.
This one completely rewrites the concept of romantic intensity for me.
It literally translates to, may you bury me.
Wow.
It is spoken to someone deeply beloved, expressing the absolute fervent wish that the speaker will die before the beloved does. Because the speaker finds the idea of living in a world without them fundamentally unendurable.
In English, we say, I love you.
Yeah.
Arabic says, may I die before you so I never have to experience the agony of your absence.
Yeah.
It is a heavy, beautiful burden to place on a word.
And from the sublime to the ridiculous, Indonesian gives us jayus.
The ultimate dad joke.
A joke that is so incredibly unfunny, so poorly constructed, and told so pathetically that it actually becomes hilarious by virtue of its absolute failure.
We all know a Jaius, The groan that inadvertently morphs into a laugh because the attempt was just so sad.
We've all told one, too.
True. And finally, a word that every English speaker needs every November. The Georgian word, shumamajummo.
Literally, I accidentally ate the whole thing.
I love it.
The specific act of intending to stop eating because you are full, but finding the food so delicious that you lose all willpower and consume it entirely.
So to you, the listener, as we go through this catalog of human experience, I have to ask, which of these words gave you that massive aha moment?
Which one was it?
Which word just successfully diagnosed a feeling you have been carrying around your entire life without a label? Was it the torchless Hispanic of the closing gate? The Weltschmerz of the evening news?
It is a profoundly validating experience to finally locate the terminology for your own internal life.
It really is. But this raises a massive, obvious question. With all these incredible, hyper-specific, highly useful words existing out there in the world, why hasn't English just invented its own native versions? If English speakers feel the world pain, and we clearly do, why didn't we forge an old English word for it centuries ago?
Because the English language operates under a completely different philosophical framework than many other languages.
How so?
English doesn't need to invent native equivalents. English is a pragmatic thief. It just steals them.
We have no linguistic pride.
None. We have an incredibly open, porous vocabulary. English is acquisition-oriented rather than purist.
Why is that?
To understand why, look at the history of the language itself. In 1066, the Norman conquest effectively smashed Old French and Old English together.
Right.
English is fundamentally a hybrid language born of linguistic collision. Therefore, it has almost no inherent resistance to foreign vocabulary.
Contrast that with French.
Exactly. France has the Académie Française, that is a literal state-sponsored institution dedicated to protecting the French language from foreign influence.
They guard the doors.
Yes. When a new technological concept emerges, the Academy will laboriously invent a native French word for it to keep the language pure.
But English has no bouncer at the door of the dictionary. There is no central authority.
None at all. When English speakers encounter a concept for which they have no word, they simply take the foreign word wholesale.
We just take it.
Schadenfreude, Saudade, Hig, Ikigai, kindergarten, tsunami. We absorb them with zero friction. We found them useful, we didn't have an equivalent, so we took them.
And that's why our dictionary is so huge.
This is exactly why English has well over 1 million words, far more than most other global languages.
But wait, let me push back on this a little.
Okay.
If we are able to easily borrow a word, like schadenfreude,
Yeah.
and immediately, intuitively understand what it means, doesn't that prove that the feeling was already culturally salient for us?
I see where you're going.
Doesn't that actually debunk the weak Sapir-Whorf theory? If we didn't need the word to feel the feeling, what does the word actually do?
That is a phenomenal question. It is true that you can experience the biological feeling without the word.
Right.
But when a culture lacks a word for a concept over centuries, that absence is itself critical data.
Data about what?
It tells us something profound about what that culture has not historically found important enough to elevate into public discourse.
Okay, let's use Hig as an example to unpack that.
Perfect. English lacks a single native word for the specific pleasure of being in a warm, comfortable, candlelit room with good company while a storm rages outside.
Right.
Now, this is obviously not because English speakers over the last 1,000 years didn't experience the physiological warmth of a fire on a winter night. They did.
We had fires.
But historically, Anglo-American cultures did not find this specific domestic comfort important enough to isolate, define, and name as a standalone philosophical concept.
We experienced it, but we didn't build a cultural altar to it.
Precisely. And the naming of a concept elevates it from a fleeting personal feeling to a tangible cultural object.
It makes it real.
Once it has a name, it becomes something that can be discussed, cultivated, recommended, marketed, and designed for. Because the Danes have a word for Hig, they have an ongoing multi-generational cultural conversation about it. They debate how to create it, they identify what threatens it in modern digital life, they study why it matters for mental health, and they actively protect it.
So they can study it?
English speakers had the exact same physical sensation, but until very recently, we didn't have the conversation because we lacked the vocabulary to anchor it.
I see. So the word actually acts like a spotlight in a dark theater.
A spotlight.
The raw feeling, the experience of sitting by the fire, or the secret thrill of a rival failing, that is the stage. The stage is always there.
Right.
But borrowing the word turns the spotlight on, illuminating that specific patch of the stage so that everyone in the audience can finally look at it together, point at it, and talk about it.
That is exactly the mechanism, and we are witnessing the weak form of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis in real-time action right now, as the word hig has aggressively entered the English lexicon over the last decade. A massive cultural conversation about the value of specific domestic comfort, work-life balance, and intentional coziness has spread right along with it.
So the imported word literally generated the cultural conversation.
Yes.
Okay, but if we could just borrow words and explain them in a paragraph, isn't translation ultimately just a math problem?
A math problem.
Yeah, like X equals Y, Hig equals cozy plus friends, Weltschmerz equals idealism minus reality. Why do linguists claim translation is so agonizingly difficult?
Because the untranslatable words reveal a deeper, much more frustrating truth. Translation is frequently philosophically impossible, not just technically difficult.
Philosophically impossible.
It's not an algebraic equation.
Unpack the philosophical impossibility for me.
Let's look back at Saudade. You can translate the pure dictionary information content of the word. You can tell an English speaker it means a melancholic longing for something loved and lost.
Right, that's the definition.
You have successfully transmitted the data, but you have absolutely failed to translate the cultural weight of the word.
The historical baggage.
Yes. Saudade is not just a clinical description of an emotional state. It is a profound cultural identity marker.
Okay.
It contains within it the DNA of the Portuguese people's specific historical relationship with the Atlantic Ocean, with the Age of Discovery, with centuries of maritime loss, and with a specific brand of fatalistic poetry.
So when I, as an American, say, I feel melancholic longing because my favorite coffee shop closed, I am just describing it Tuesday.
Right.
But when a Portuguese person says saudade, they are locating themselves inside a centuries-old cultural tradition. They are participating in the emotional heritage of their nation.
Precisely. To translate saudade as longing strips it of its soul. The same is true of ikigai.
Because it's not just a Venn diagram.
Exactly. You can describe the diagram, what you love, what pays, etc., but you cannot translate the specifically Japanese historical relationship with duty, community cohesion, and the deep egoless integration of work into identity.
That makes the word ikigai feel entirely different from an American saying, I really like my career path.
Completely different.
So truly, learning a new language is infinitely more complex than memorizing a bilingual dictionary.
It really is.
It is the slow absorption of the invisible cultural weight, the historical trauma, and the sociological priorities that native speakers attach to those sounds.
Which brings us to the listener, particularly the listener who speaks more than one language.
Oh, yes.
We have talked about the cultural and philosophical implications, but what happens to the physical hardware of the human mind when you actually start absorbing these multiple overlapping linguistic worlds?
Let's get into the cognitive science, because this is where the brain rewiring hook from the introduction comes back.
It does.
What is the bilingual advantage?
There is a massive, incredibly robust body of research, heavily championed by cognitive scientist Ellen Bialystock at York University. She demonstrated that bilingual and multilingual speakers, people who actively navigate between two or more languages daily, have measurable, profound cognitive advantages in specific executive domains.
What exactly is happening under the hood? When a bilingual person is speaking, what is their brain actually doing differently than a monolingual brain?
The key mechanism Bialystock identified involves the constant, relentless management of competing linguistic systems.
Competing systems.
Right. Imagine a bilingual speaker who is fluent in English and Spanish. When they are speaking English to you, their brain does not simply switch the Spanish network off.
It stays on.
Both language networks remain highly active and constantly primed. Therefore, to speak a coherent English sentence, the brain must continuously, actively inhibit the Spanish vocabulary to prevent it from bleeding out of their mouth.
So if I'm looking at a dog, my brain is simultaneously retrieving dog and perro, and my executive control system has to actively slam the door on perro every single time I open my mouth.
Exactly.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And that constant suppression, that microsecond conflict resolution happening thousands of times a day, acts as a massive lifelong workout for the brain's executive control system.
Wow.
This is the part of the brain located in the prefrontal cortex responsible for attention, focus, planning, and ignoring irrelevant distractions.
So just by possessing and using the language, your brain is doing neurological push-ups in the background.
Constantly.
Does this translate to benefits outside of just speaking?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When researchers put bilinguals and monolinguals through cognitive stress tests, like the Stroop test or the Flanker task, which measure the ability to ignore distracting visual information, bilinguals consistently perform better and faster.
That's incredible.
Their brains are simply better trained at filtering out noise. Furthermore, this lifelong cognitive workout creates what we call cognitive reserve.
Cognitive reserve.
Yes, which has been shown to significantly delay the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's symptoms, sometimes by up to 5 years compared to monolinguals.
The language physically fortifies the brain against decay. That alone is an incredible reason to learn a language.
It's the best defense we know of.
But it goes beyond just neuroplasticity and brain health, doesn't it? There is a conceptual superpower here, too.
We call it the vocabulary advantage, and this ties back to the work of psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett on emotional granularity.
What does that mean?
Multilingual speakers do not just know more phonetic sounds for the exact same concepts. They can draw upon the conceptual vocabulary of entirely distinct cultures. They can access and utilize concepts that any single language simply may not possess.
They literally process reality in higher resolution.
They do.
Think about the implications of this. If you are an English learner who natively speaks Portuguese, you bring the concept of saudade to your emotional toolkit.
Right?
You have a diagnostic tool for grief that a monolingual English speaker fundamentally lacks.
Exactly.
If you speak Japanese and English, you can walk through a forest in autumn thinking in the specific frequency of monowares.
It changes the walk.
It does. You can look at a dying leaf and process its beauty with a conceptual clarity and an aesthetic depth that I, armed only with my English dictionary, cannot reach.
Because these concepts, once they are named and mapped in your mind, become genuinely accessible for conscious reflection.
They are tools you can use.
Right. You can certainly have the wordless, baffling feeling, as we discussed with the childhood park shrinking, but possessing the exact word allows you to notice the feeling precisely.
To put a pin in it.
Yes, to categorize it efficiently, to share it accurately with others, and to reflect on it deliberately without expending massive cognitive energy.
I want to speak directly to the learner here, especially the person currently grinding through the process of learning English.
It's a tough process.
Sometimes when you're acquiring a new language, you hit these frustrating gaps. You have a precise, complex word in your native tongue, and you search the English dictionary and you realize it just isn't there.
It's just missing.
It can feel like a failure of translation or a failure of your own growing vocabulary. But what the science and the philosophy are telling us today is that your native, untranslatable words are not a barrier.
Not all.
They are a profound enrichment. You're bringing a spotlight to the English language that we desperately need.
Every single language on Earth has massive gaps, and those gaps should be a source of intellectual wonder, not frustration.
Wonder, exactly.
The existence of concepts in your native language that English cannot quite capture is an open invitation to show English speakers an entirely new way to perceive the world.
Yes.
You are acquiring the vocabulary of English, yes, but you are also holding on to the concepts your culture found important enough to name.
And maybe those are exactly the concepts we have been blind to. So the multilingual speaker doesn't just know more words.
They possess more of the world.
We have covered a truly massive amount of ground in this deep dive.
We really have.
We started with the jarring realization of a childhood park feeling inexplicably small, a sensation with no English name. We explored the architecture of the mind and how the paved paths of our language, whether it is tracking true north or processing the color blue, dictate the habitual grooves of our cognition.
We looked deeply into the Anglo-American mirror, seeing our historical preoccupations with industrial productivity, mechanical feedback loops, and the constant friction of social awkwardness.
And we traveled the globe to fill the beautiful gaps in our lexicon. From the existential Weltschmerz and gate-closing panic of German, to the dappled light and aesthetic transience of Japanese, to the cozy welfare state warmth of Danish Hygge.
Beautiful concepts.
We've seen that English is a pragmatic historical thief, borrowing what it needs, and that the multilingual brain is a high-resolution, finely tuned engine of executive control.
And ideally, it leaves us with the profound understanding that every single language is just one lens, one highly specific historical perspective on the infinite vastness of the human experience.
But before we let you go, we want to leave you with a final puzzle to chew on. Something to think about as you move through your day.
If the absence of a word tells us what a culture has historically ignored, and the creation of a new word brings a phenomenon into sharp, actionable cultural focus.
Think about the reality we are living in right this very second. The rapidly changing, hyper-connected, artificially intelligent digital world.
It's changing so fast.
We have invented words like doom scrolling to capture new behaviors. But what about the inner life? What is a brand new, highly specific, modern feeling that you experience daily?
Something totally new.
Maybe it's the specific localized anxiety of seeing a read receipt without a reply,
Mm.
or the strange phantom sensation of your phone vibrating when it isn't, or the exhaustion of performing your identity on a screen, a feeling that no language on earth has a satisfying word for yet.
We need new words.
And if you were the one to invent that word, how might that single, simple act of naming fundamentally alter the way future generations process our present reality?
It is an immense, almost frightening power, the power to name.
It really is. Yeah. Because until you find the name, you're just standing in a childhood park feeling a strange heavy weight in your chest, completely out of words.